I'm not sure how that looks on your side with regard to the detail and how small it might be, but this in effect an overview of what I discussed with James and Darren on Monday, I think it was. And in essence, what that is, it's an overview of what we're trying to achieve. And I think one of the problems I've had, I've automatically assumed that everyone's got an understanding of what project management is and why we do projects and why we don't just execute a series of tasks. And it goes back to some of the training I had years ago, and I think it was Goldratt's theory of constraints, when he talks about when attempting to improve an organization, you should embrace a holistic approach. And that's really what project management is, because ultimately there's endless places that can be improved. So you've got to identify the elements in the system on which the improvement efforts should be focused. To identify them, you need to take a holistic approach. You need to step back a little bit and see how everything interacts or interconnects, or where they interact or interconnect. So hence, as a consequence of that, we've got something called MaXus Referral Project. And in essence, what that is, if you look at the two grey boxes on there, we now, as a result of Monday's meeting, have defined a vision, a mission, and a value. I don't know if you can read that because it's quite small.
It's a bit small.
But what I'll do is I'll put this into Trello, and I'll ask that Darren sends it out on this Tuesday or Wednesday's email to the group. But this is what the three of us come up with. And I don't want to go through it all because it might take too long, James. Or I can do if that's what people want.
Steve, I think it would be useful to, I think rather than relying on us all to read this, I've read through what you've got on the right-hand side there, and I think it would be good for you to take a few minutes and just summarize your thinking, because I know you've done a lot of thinking here, which I can see in what you've presented here. So I think take a few minutes and let's just understand what you're proposing.
Okay, so the proposal is, it all starts with the mission, the vision, mission, and the value, that left box on the grey, and ultimately it all ends with referrals. Forget all the fluff in between. We need a starting point. We feel we've got that now, and where we want to get to is referrals, and I think everyone on the call is fully aligned with that. The problem is there's more than one way to get from A to B. There's multiple ways. The way we took is, if you look at the grey arrow, we took the line above that, or the section above the grey arrow, where we've come up with a multitude, and I think initially 42 small projects or tasks or series of tasks to achieve getting from A to B. That added a level of complexity, which is not a problem in itself, but for where we are in our current journey, doesn't really match with where MaXus is today. And we had 7 sub-projects within the project, 42 action items, 7 team leads. Quite complex, because all those team leads had to get everybody together for calls, and everyone's running their own business. So getting people's time slots to match up has been, in many cases, quite difficult. Because of that, you've got a slower execution time. Nothing wrong with it, but it's probably more suited to larger or more mature organizations. If you look below the arrow, and what we're trying to do here, the objective is to minimize efforts to get from A to B. We feel that that massive projects, sub-projects, and action items can be reduced dramatically. And that example at the bottom is not the conclusion of what we've came to this week, but that's potentially what it could look like. Reducing it down to 4 projects maximum, reducing the number of action items from 42 to 15, obviously less phone calls, less coordination for the phone calls, and more importantly, faster execution time. So that's the overview of what was discussed between myself, James, and Darren on Monday. I'll go to the next slide. So what we decided on, we decided to, I think it was last Friday, we decided that Annalisa and Linda would help support this project. And we had a discussion this week for, I think it was an hour and a half or so. We had a discussion this week. And what we were trying to do was get a handle on consolidating a lot of those tasks and a lot of those sub-projects into something which A, looked more manageable, but B, more importantly, was more manageable and easier to execute. So these are the things we considered as we went through the exercise. And again, simplicity was first and foremost. We created an acceptance criteria, and we used that as the basis for all the questions we asked and the answers that came as a consequence. So we looked at the groups of the 7 groups that do not meet that acceptance criteria, any of the tasks within those groups. We then tried to look at a streamlined list of project and tasks, looking primarily what would essentially be a critical path. And then we also talked about the tool we're going to use to communicate the project. The acceptance criteria, if you can't see it, is those groups and tasks critical to get from vision to referral as quickly as possible, whilst considering we're an informal entity and not a corporation. Any groups, tasks removed, obviously will be kept, so there's no wasted work or effort here. And as the MaXus organization evolves, these things will come back into play and can be implemented accordingly as needed. So again, for all of the 7 project leads and all the team members, for any work that you've done, first of all, kudos to you for doing it so quickly. But secondly, that will be needed. It's just a question of when.
Correct, thank you.
This is the final slide, James. This is the consolidation of what we achieved this week. And we're certainly by no means finished with this approach of consolidating. There's more work to do. But if you look at the bubble chart on the left, that's a color-coded summary of the 42 items that we achieved at the end of the Strat Gap and Strat Snap exercise, which is really an all-encompassing project, which is a great thing to have. That was what we based as our current for this week's meetings. To come to the chart on the right, which is the proposed one. And as you can see, we've dramatically reduced the number of sub-projects and also obviously the items as a consequence. Now, this isn't finished, and it's not finished because I never got a chance to catch up with Alex this week. Alex is the bubble, he's the lead on the bubble that's in purple. And we're going to schedule a call with Alex on a priority to determine what we can do to either merge or delete some of those items on there to make sure that that project is in line with everything else. And the red chart is the one that Darren's working on, which is the marketing chart. Although Darren and I had a discussion on Monday, late Monday afternoon, it wasn't at the level of detail where we could go through the objective of the exercise. And I know from seeing some of Darren's slides that he's already done a lot of consolidation on his side anyway. So what you see in that red bubble is going to reduce dramatically with what Darren and his team have done. So that is actually a worst case, the chart on the right. It's significantly simpler than that, which is a good thing. It meets the objective of the project. We've defined some next action items. Obviously, as mentioned, meeting with Alex and a further meeting with Darren to consolidate and update this chart. Define task owners. Well, there'll be a dramatically reduced number of tasks now, so we'll need less task owners. Tasks into Trello will be the next stage. We will, as Annalisa mentioned, we would like to make Trello the default tool for communicating, not just communicating, for task management, project management, as well as keeping a database of documents, etc. And the inevitable weekly update meetings, which will certainly happen between Linda, myself, and Annalisa. And where relevant, we'd like to drag other people in. It might be we drag Alex and Darren in because they're prospective leads of their prospective groups. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at. The closing message would be, if you're working on anything at the moment, that's great. It's not wasted. We'll keep it, we'll use it. I would suggest that with the exception of Darren's group, because I think they're quite well on the way to executing actions. And what I can see, there's no conflict in any of the objectives of the project. So I think Darren and his team are going to continue to move forward in that direction. But for the rest of the group, I would suggest anything you're currently working on, put on hold or contact myself, Linda or Annalisa, for further discussions so we can see that it can be integrated into what we're already doing and nobody's going to duplicate or waste any efforts. And that's basically it, James. That's a 3-page summary, which I'll put into Trello and I can send out to the group after the call anyway.
Steve, that's great. Thank you. I have to admit that I can't read the text in all of those little dots on your on your slide there. So maybe when you send it out, you could do another slide with those of us with impaired sight, with just a list of the different items there. That would be great. That's excellent. Thanks for all your hard work. Steve has put in a huge amount of effort in the last week. So, real appreciation for that, Steve.